Thank you. So with this, let me request the diplomatic advisor to the President of France, Jacques Audibert, to address the gathering. His bio would be on the screens, but he clearly comes from a country that India has a very deep and significant relationship with. They are in the middle of a number of developments, their own elections, the Brexit, and of course, the challenges around radicalism and those emerging from the Middle East. So let me invite Mr. Audibert to address this gathering. He will give initial remarks of 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll take a few questions. Thank you, Mr. Audibert, for joining us.
Thank you, dear host, dear Secretary Jaishankar, former ministers, future ministers, ambassadors. It's a pleasure to address this audience today for me. I'm very honored to be the first French speaker in the framework of this dialogue, which is taking place in a year where we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of the strategic partnership between France and India. It's taking place in a moment where we have an exceptional relationship based on trust and confidence between our two leaders, based on shared interest and shared values. And all those here in the room who are responsible for diplomacy know that any decision is the result of a balance between those two values and interests. And this proximity between France and India is a big help for us to do so, not only in the region, but in the whole world. Let me welcome the relevance of the thematic of this edition, multilateralism with multipolarity. It's a bit challenging because we know that we do not all share the same vision of multilateralism. I will do my best to be as short as possible, to give space for an exchange with the room, which I look forward, but to exchange with you about our vision of this multilateralism and this multipolarity. We believe that multilateralism, of course, is key because we are facing all multiform threats, terrorism, which has been mentioned by Mr. Jaishankar and by many other speakers, and which will be, but also rise of cyber threats or other kind of threats. We also face the challenging of the international law and even the credibility of some major institutions, starting with the Security Council regarding the situation in Syria, or the Ukrainian crisis and the illegal annexation of Crimea. We also have to deal with interrogation on the future of international relations after the American elections, big challenge for all of us, which we should deal with calm and giving time to the situation to acquire some clarity, but also interrogation after the Brexit about the European project. And we all face, mainly in Europe maybe, rise of populism in some countries against the backdrop of economic crisis for some, social and moral crisis models for other, in the context of the migratory crisis in Europe especially. So France and India share a deep-rooted attachment to multilateralism and effective, constructive multilateralism. Let me just mention two issues. First, the peacekeeping operation. India is now, I think, the third contributor to the peacekeeping operation of the United Nations with 8,000 Indian peacekeepers, and France is doing its best to contribute to this peacekeeping operation. 3 days ago, I was with my president in Mali, in Bamako, for a French African summit taking place with 37 heads of state and government. And many of them mentioned what the president decided to do in Mali. I think this is a good illustration of what we have in mind. I mean, a combination of national determination and multilateralism. What we did in Mali was an intervention against terrorism at the request of the authorities, so with a very clear legal basis, with some limited means, because we do not consider ourselves as a giant. We know we have limited means. We intervened in Mali, we saved democracy in a country with 4,000 people, 4,000 military people which were engaged, which is very limited compared with the figures we are used to deal with. But we decided immediately to act within the African Union, within United Nations, using the European Union, with a resolution, making very quickly a resolution, and making sure that a political process is following this intervention. Though this is exactly a good illustration of what we have in mind in terms of contribution to the stability. Taking risk, because it's risky to intervene militarily, using the major asset we have with our armed forces, which are very skilled, which are able to deal with such a situation, not hesitating to use force when we have a legal basis, but making sure that all these efforts are immediately, by definition, embedded in a multilateral dimension. Again, African Union, European Union, and of course, United Nations. I want to mention another very important asset of the international community and multilateralism, which is the success of COP21. We've been very proud to host this, but we only were hosting the meeting. Many countries paid a major contribution, and I want here to underline the major contribution paid by Prime Minister Modi and India in the success of the COP21, which shows that the multilateralism can also deal with this kind of global issue. So, is it time just for self-congratulation on multilateralism based on those two examples? Certainly not. We have to think together how to have a more effective and representative multilateralism. We all know that we have an issue with the Security Council. What is at stake is the credibility of the whole system. You know that France's position is to enlarge the Security Council to take into account the new reality, because we believe that major partners as India not only deserve to be part of the Security Council, but also, permanent, but also need to be there for the sake of the credibility of the whole system. As you know, maybe, France has also proposed a reform of the veto right. What we are witnessing, what we have been witnessing, both on Crimea, but mainly on Syria and on the conflict on Syria and Iraq, is the use of a veto preventing United Nations from doing the role here. This is why we have been proposing now for 4 years that the veto right should not be used by permanent members in the case of massive crimes. And so far, we got a lot of support in this. We hope to get Indian support as soon as possible on this initiative, but we believe we cannot take for granted that the current system is working and enough performing to play the role which is so precious. We also have to make progress and to focus on non-proliferation and disarmament fora. And you know that here, France and India are very close. The necessary expansion of control regime to all countries with capability and accountability, including India, NSG, but also MTCR and Vassana arrangement. We also underline the importance of the Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons against the use of chemical weapons, dramatically illustrated in Syria, and we unsuccessfully have tried to take measures against that. And there is also useful to mention further progress on disarmament by taking into account the security context. Let me mention here the sense of support of France and India to an FMCT, which is blocked because of the opposition of another country. So this is the multilateralism we start for, which is a multilateralism based on respect for international law. But we also need to make sure that the rights of the states are respected. The first of these rights is the freedom of movement. The principle of freedom of navigation and air traffic are a crucial issue. And we are particularly attached to it. We are constantly reminded of our commitment to the maintenance of a maritime order based on rules in accordance with international law, as reflected in the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea. The issue is particularly important and goes beyond the regions, as many of you already know. The respect of the law of the sea in the seas of China is crucial because if it's not respected, it will be threatened tomorrow in the Arctic, the Mediterranean, or elsewhere. We must defend this law and defend ourselves by the law. Another very important right for the states is the self-defense right. You know, my country has been severely attacked by terrorists which were sent by organizations which are located in country we know. We use our self-defense right to tackle this threat by, within a coalition, attacking those who are organizing these crime, these terrorists, and we will go on doing like that, but we believe that self-defense should remain and are part of the points which should be guaranteed by multilateralism. So the states have rights, but the states should also respect the law and the rights of a certain number of commitments. The first one, of course, is the humanitarian law, the Geneva Conventions, and the human rights. We consider, and President Hollande had the opportunity to tell President Putin, we consider that what has been done in Aleppo, in Syria, does not abide by the humanitarian law and does not serve the cause of peace, not only as a principle, because as principle we want to serve this international law, but also from a pragmatic point of view, because supporting those who are responsible for mistreatment of their own country, of their own population, cannot lead to the peace. I wish I had more time to develop this issue, but this is really a key one. So states should respect the law. Another example where France has decided to act was the Crimean issue. Here, what is at stake is a milestone of the stability of this world, of the stability of Europe, and of peace, which is stability of the borders. What happened 2 years ago was that the borders have been changed by force without using the international law, and facing this very big challenge to our security, we had two possibilities. On one hand, to act immediately against by force. On the other hand, to try to create a dialogue. This is the way we have chosen, creating the so-called Normandy format. That's to say, President Hollande and Chancellor Merkel have decided to bring together the Russian and the Ukrainians to try to find a solution. Talking with the Russian in full respect, understanding their argument, but being very clear about what we demand them to do, and using sanctions to change the equation, to make sure that they have to listen what we have to ask them to do. Facing a very difficult situation. It's painful, it's demanding. We had maybe dozens of meetings or phone calls with the two parties, but President Hollande and Chancellor Merkel considered it was their duty to try to find a solution to tackle this very, very important challenge doing like that. So there is a crucial role for states with strategic independence, such as India and France, in serving this security in this uncertain world, with threats multiplied by where no actor has the capacity or the will to deal with them alone. Countries with strategic independence, such as France and India, much more than ever do things together. First, to support multilateralism. This is what we are doing together. Second, to act together for regional stability. The maritime security cooperation in the Indian Ocean is a good example for that. You know, France is a country bordering the Indian Ocean, is one of the few countries in the zone with capacity in the north, thanks to our facility in the Emirates, in which France, with whom France has a very close strategic partnership, and in the south from our territory, the Réunion Island, which is part of France. And there is a huge delegation participating to this dialogue today. Tomorrow, we're going to have an in-depth dialogue on this issue, which is a key part of the strategic partnership that I have already mentioned, based on the idea of security and freedom of navigation. So we also must remember, France and India together, that beyond this bilateral cooperation, there is an interest in ad hoc formats between countries with capacity and sharing the same concerns, This strategic partnership we are enhancing every week, every month, every year between France and India, aim at having a better cooperation in this kind of initiative. We have also to respond together in a concrete way to universal challenges such as terrorism, which has already been mentioned, but also climate change or other kind of issues like that. And also to find innovative solutions to foster development. Partnership between France and India companies, technology transfer, Make in India, or Smart City, these are all milestones of our bilateral cooperation. I've been too long already. Let me mention, of course, European Union as a key partner to do all that. Just one dimension of European Union, which is security dimension. At the moment where we hear that NATO can be challenged, at the moment where European Union is challenged as well, we believe that the answer would be, on the contrary, a reinforcement of European Union capacities. We have been pushing very hard for decades now for the European Union to acquire an autonomous capability in intervention. So far, it has not been successful for many reasons, but we believe now the time has come for the Europeans to take their own responsibility and to bring an answer to those who consider that the balance is not good within the alliance, within NATO, between those who pay a lot for their defense and those who consider that decreasing the GDP part of their defense towards 1%, consider that the defense is taken from somebody else. The answer is through Europe, through a stronger Europe, which will be in a position to tackle the challenge we are all facing. After all, 15 years ago, we already agreed to be in a position to deploy 30,000 people within a year and to sustain them for a year. This has, from afar, not been implemented, but we believe that today's the context of NATO challenge of the Brexit should lead us towards this capability. So as a conclusion, I will skip my conclusion because I want to exchange with you. So as a conclusion, let me tell you that, again, what France is trying to do in its partnership with India is first to value it. I will have the privilege of meeting the Prime Minister this afternoon and convey to him all those messages from President Hollande. We value a lot this partnership because it's between two countries who consider they have a global dimension and a global mission in the service of democracy, of multilateralism, and facing many the same challenges and sharing so many values, among them the one we cherish the more, which is democracy, which is peace, which is respect to all community. And this is what unites us, and I'm convinced that in the coming years, this cooperation will be more and more important and deep. Thank you very much.
We'll ask a few questions. We have some from the young fellows that I'm aware of. Others who want to pose questions should move towards the mic, but I will first go to the young fellows. So Tal is standing there. Introduce yourself and pose a question. Whoever wants to ask a question has to move to a mic. And we'll try and take, so can we group them together so we can take more? Yeah, so we will take maybe 3 or 4 at a time, depending on how long the questions are, and then move to responses. Mr. Mooney, if you have to ask a question, you have to go towards the mic. Tal.
Mr. Audibert, thank you very much. My name is Tal Shalev and I'm from Israel. I'd like to refer to a recent multilateral venue which took place in Paris just earlier this week. The Paris conference adjourned this Sunday. It was a demonstration of multilateralism, but how efficient is that if one of the sides, the Israeli side, of course, refuses to come to the table? How efficient is multilateralism without one of the sides actually being there? And what is the outlook of this process, given the objection that we heard from President-elect Trump and maybe what we would call a different approach? It seems that he might be signaling that he will be taking on the peace process. And just on another note, another multilateral project, the nuclear negotiations, which concluded last year. So what do you think the outlook of this project is, given President-elect's statements on the nuclear agreement with Iran, and how do you see this playing out in the upcoming months?
There were two questions. We'll try and pose only one. Ivan.
Hello, my name is Ivan Vejvoda, and apart from being a Raisina Young Fellow, I'm from Serbia, and I work on bringing my country into the EU. And I wanted to ask you, during your speech, you briefly mentioned the migration crisis, and which saw a divide between EU member states, with my country, a candidate country, playing a more constructive role than some members of the EU. And the current Maltese presidency has security as one of their priorities, both internally on control of borders and on the possibility of reaching agreements with other countries similar to the one that was reached with Turkey. So I would like to ask you about the future of a more consolidated approach within the European Union towards the migration crisis, as well as the possibility of these agreements with third countries. Thank you.
Rohitesh.
Thank you very much. My name is Rohitesh Dhawan, and I work for KPMG, and I'm one of the Raisina Young Fellows. You mentioned the need for a stronger Europe, one of the disruptions to which is clearly Britain's decision to leave the European Union. Yesterday we heard Theresa May's approach to Brexit, and later this afternoon we'll be getting Minister Boris Johnson's perspective. I'd be really keen to get your European perspective on the negotiating position that Theresa May set out yesterday.
And the final question for this round, Professor Muni.
Excellency, you mentioned something about UNSC reforms. If the UNSC has to be reconstituted de novo today, what would be the credentials of countries like France and Britain to ask for the permanent seat? And then the question of veto. It is true that the new members are asked not to have access to veto. How about those who are having veto deciding to give it up?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will turn it over to you now.
Okay, so many questions. First, on how efficient is the multilateralism in Paris, as far as understood, with the conference which has been organized by the French Foreign Office about Middle East peace process. I can reverse the question. How can you imagine what would have been the situation had we decided to renounce to organize it because of some perspective, because of some declaration? We believe we are deeply committed in having a negotiated solution based on a two-state solution in the Middle East peace process. A resolution has been adopted 4 weeks ago now about the settlement. So that's to say that our role, we consider that our role as being in a position to talk to both parties is to try to bring people together, and this was the purpose of this conference. On one hand, to bring them together, to remind to everybody that the only solution is a negotiated one, a bilateral one, that's to say, not imposed by one of the parties, and based on a two-state solution, because these conditions tend to be more and more forgotten in the context of possible new position of a new American administration. Again, we'll see in the coming months, in the duration. But the second purpose of the conference was to be pragmatic. The idea was to bring together working groups to show the benefits for peace for the two parties. You know, you cannot tell people make peace against their will if they don't understand what they will get in terms of development, in terms of help, of investment, of growth in their country. This was the purpose. You also mentioned the nuclear negotiation. I guess it was the Iranian ones, because I don't see other nuclear negotiations recently concluded. Was it? Am I right? So I was part of this negotiation as political director. I spent 5 years negotiating them. France had a very clear position, which was we have no problem with Iran. By definition, we have no reason to have any problem with the country, but we have a major problem of nuclear proliferation in Iran, and this has to be said. So we had a strong position. It happened that sometimes we were the one blocking an agreement at certain moment because we considered it was not safe again. Safe means making sure that Iran does not acquire a military nuclear capability. So we invested a lot, and we came to a conclusion. It was on the 14th of July, which is maybe our national day, but this was by chance. On the 14th of July 2015, we succeeded to have this agreement. We consider this agreement is working, is now giving the necessary condition, and that questioning this agreement today would be much more dangerous than implementing it, and would open a Pandora box, because if the agreement is questioned, the Iranians will take measures we don't want to take, and we'll have to implement some solution will have to be implemented other than a negotiation, which we do not want. So we worked so hard for so many years to obtain those guarantees. We consider they should be kept seriously as the better bulwark against nuclear proliferation. Migration crisis has been and will be a major challenge for European Union. We all know, I think Secretary Johnson will be much more clear than me this afternoon about that the migration issue, that's to say the freedom of circulation among people of the European Union, was a key question leading to the result of the referendum, leading to the Brexit. So we have to face this challenge. Again, as I said in my introduction, bringing together our values, our interests. The value of Europe is to be open, is to be generous, is to be in a position to bring to those people who have no choice but to come here, to bring them conditions for a real life. This is what at the heart of European Union's value. Having said that, it is impossible for the European Union to welcome, to integrate in its economy millions of refugees which are coming. So we have to find a way which is based on welcoming those who have no choice, the refugees, on development in the countries which is the provenance of all the others, which come for economic reasons. So we have to work upstream with those countries to make sure that to offer them decent condition of development, and this has to be mixed with a system of control of the borders, because no country or no group of country can reasonably pretend living in a system which is open. So it has to be controlled. We have to provide to those people human and dignified welcome, but then to be in a position to treat differently those who have to come because they are refugees and the others. As for the UN security, the speech of the Prime Minister May yesterday, well, everybody knows that European Union is based on 4 freedoms, and you cannot pick up one of the freedom without implementing the others. So Prime Minister May came to the logic conclusion that she would get rid of the single market. That this will have, of course, consequences. We said from the very beginning that on one hand, we just cannot accept that you have better conditions from outside the euro than inside, and you cannot, again, have one solidarity and refusing the others. So this was not possible. So in that sense, it's not exactly a surprise what she said yesterday, and my president took note of this, and diplomats in the room know what it means. We have taken note of this position. Having said that, it's certainly not our interest to have a weak United Kingdom. We have a very traditional, very deeply rooted bilateral partnership which will go on, including on military and strategic issues. This will never be interrupted. As for the rest, we'll have to negotiate, we'll have to see, but bearing in mind those very clear principles and making everything we can to have a strong United Kingdom, but a strong Europe is the priority for us. As for the UN Security Council reform, I agree with you, sir. It's a very old story. We are ready again to question the veto right, because the veto right is weakening the credibility of the Security Council, and our interest is to have a strong Security Council. We will never consider that our position in the Security Council is challenged, because we are working with it, we are using it for the sake of international peace and stability. So we don't feel threatened in our role in the Security Council, but what is evident is that the Security Council, as the first possible opportunity, has to be enlarged to take into account the reality we are experiencing in this room. You know, it doesn't make sense to have outside the permanent members, country like yours or others, who now should be, of course, part of a body which is in a position to decide so much for so many. But again, we also, within the Security Council, should find a way to tackle the question of veto, bringing together the interest of those who have this veto right, but also the interest of the international community. And for us, the idea was a limitation in case of mass murder, mass crime, which was obviously the case in Syria, to quote the last example we had.
Great. So now, unfortunately, time is up. The lady there, Anu, has been waiting, and I'll give you the first question with Secretary Johnson. You can pose his question to him. You might get an interesting answer. But we'll have to close it here. Let me thank the diplomatic advisor to the President of France, Jacques Audibert, for coming here. And let me thank the ambassador of France to India for making this happen. I had requested him a few months ago, and he promised instantly this would happen. So thank you both for being here, and please join me in applauding them for the intervention and for the discussions.